Okay, check 1 2, testing. Let's see. We're live. Should be live. Let me know in the chat. Please hit the like button. Really helps fuel the algorithm. We are back. And let's see here. Did that work? How's the audio? Hopefully good. So I'm back from my trip. There was not a stream last week. I was hoping to do a stream earlier in the week, and it did not happen. But we're doing one now at the usual time. So, yeah, welcome back to everyone here and to myself, I guess. Gosh, that's what happens. You take a week off, you get rusty, guys. You get rusty like real quick. But I was nervous actually today getting on the stream a bit, which is weird. And I will just say, like, the first time before I started streaming, it was months where I had to like get the nerve to stream. I had done some pre-recorded videos up until that point, but I'd never started live streaming. And I remember like messaging friends of mine who were doing live streams, and I was like, I don't know how you have like the courage to do that. And I was like, one day, I hope I have the courage you have. I remember saying that to them. And, here we are today. So please hit the like button, for my courage, I guess. But today we're going to do a pretty quick stream, I think, but because it's about another conversation with Bernardo Kastrup. I know we've done at least last week, or not last week, but the week before. The last stream we did was on a different conversation that involved Bernardo, and we've done many streams on his discussions over the years. And as I've said before, really respect that he's put out, his theory of analytic idealism, and I think it's really much closer to truth than our current materialistic model in terms of how the metaphysics, the mechanics of his metaphysics are definitely like they're really good. But and I've said this before, there is an issue with the foundation of his ideas that involve how he conceives of God, which is the universal consciousness, the universal mind, the foundational mind, the initial mind, the holistic mind of existence itself. That being, he does not believe has a will of its own, or has the ability to make choices or to have a plan. He simply says very often, and we're gonna get into it again very specifically because Alex O'Connor is he's philosophically so incredibly talented, and he's really, I just predict one day he will get to theism. And I know he studied theology in college, which I don't understand why you would ever I think he did, why you would ever study theology if you didn't believe it. That's crazy to me. But he is historically described himself as an atheist, which I've said before. There's no such thing as an atheist. There's anti-theists. And I used to self-describe myself as an atheist, so I understand. But you either believe that the universe or that existence is someone, or you don't. And you can be more confident or less confident in that. But you're either a more confident theist or a less confident theist. You're not, or you're a more confident anti-theist or a less confident anti-theist. You're not an atheist. You interact with existence every day, so constantly. You either lean towards believing that it is a someone, or you don't lean towards believing that it's not. And theist or anti-theist, there is no lack of belief about the fundamental nature of existence because you constantly interact with it. You can't not have a belief about its nature. And agnosticism, like I've said before, it's just kind of the cowardly way out. It's just somebody who it's a theist who doesn't want to admit they're a theist in front of a bunch of anti-theists, in a room full of anti-theists, or it is an anti-theist who doesn't want to admit that they are an anti-theist in a room full of theists. That's really what it is. But Alex O'Connor, though, he is extremely philosophically talented, and he's able to call out logical inconsistencies in in an argument that seems so close to theism coming from Bernardo, but then at the end, kind of logically, even if you use terms that would indicate that you're a theist, logically, the terms that you use and how you use them kind of paint a picture of anti-theism. And when you say things like the universal mind does what it does because it is what it is, it's like, okay, sure, but you said nothing there. That means nothing. But then if you say it doesn't have a plan, it's a purely instinctual kind of mind. It doesn't have desires of its own. I don't understand how that even makes sense. And it comes from just a lack of kind of the correct definition of a mind, of a fundamental enough definition of a mind. He focuses on things like metabolism and evolution as kind of the defining character mechanisms that led to the defining aspects of our minds, and that's just false and flawed. But I like how universe literally means one word. Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's amazing. It's amazing. There are this is why I'm such a stickler about words, is like there is a correct definition of a word. Yes, there's 2 degrees of freedom according to sentient singularity theory. There's always 2 degrees of freedom that would allow you to maintain logical coherence, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that one of those definitions that out of the 2 that you could choose isn't better than the other, because one of them will always be redundant and the other one will not. And you always want to choose the one that's not redundant, because why else would you have a new word for something that already has a definition that exists? So this is it's an amazingly so far perfectly consistent pattern that I see in language, and it is perfectly aligned with the patterns that I see in sentient singularity theory. So really respect both of them. I'm not trying to rip on anybody, and I try not to do that on this channel. But I'm human, but still, like, I respect Bernardo, but I really think, I mean, I don't think he's very wrong on this fundamental notion that existence itself, the mind of existence itself, that being does not have desires of its own. That is, and goals of its own, and will, essentially, of its own. And the ability to make choices, like, that is false. It just causes the same exact logical inconsistencies that physicalism comes up against. And Alex O'Connor calls him out on it, and it just goes like this to Bernardo, right over his head. All right, so first person I've seen do this to Bernardo too, in kind of person, I guess, in person, face to face. All right, here we go. First clip. But please hit the like button.
You used the word ego a few times there. And I want to guess that the way you're using the word ego is how religious traditions and philosophers of all kinds might use the word like self, which is not the same thing as consciousness, right? Like there's this sort of distinction between consciousness, which is just awareness of any kind, and then there's this thing called the self, or the ego, which is this like unity of conscious experience into like an I and a me, right? And a lot of religious traditions have taken this kind of realization that everything is made out of the same stuff, that we're all part of one big kind of mental field, and it's just like localizations, ripples in the waves, as it were, and that's all we are, but there's just one big ocean. To say that realistically this idea of the individuated self is an illusion, doesn't exist, or that there's only one self and we're kind of all participating in it. I don't know if you use the word ego in the same way that they're speaking about self, but what do you think about that? And do you believe in Bernardo Kastrup? Do you think that like you exist? You know what I mean?
No, no, I don't. I don't believe in a permanent personal self. I think the evidence is overwhelming that it's not there. What we call a personal self is a narrative. it's an inner story that we mistakenly identify with. It's that person was born that day and is married to that other person and does this or that for a living and living in this address. That's the narrative self. What we call the personal self is a narrative, the narrative self. Some psychologists would call it the adaptive self. It's a story in terms of which we can act in the world and defend ourselves psychologically. And the whole field of psychology called ego defense mechanisms. It's how you defend against the assault of the monstrous world around us. How do you defend your personal agency and even your personal value? So to the meaning that we attribute to this persistent personal self that is not there at all. It's a narrative that keeps changing. So I don't buy into that, but I will buy into what Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, called the self with capital S, because there is something that is obviously there. It obviously exists. It's the only thing that obviously exists, and that is subjectivity. Subjectivity. Philosopher Ite Shani called it core subjectivity, which is what's left when you get rid of all the narratives about what we are. It is that to which experience is given, that which receives experience as the subject of experience. Galen Strawson wrote once that not even a sensible Buddhist would deny that there is the subject and that experience entails a subject. Now, we mistake what that subject is. Is it personal? Is it permanent? I think the answer to both questions is no, but that we mistake the characteristics we attribute to the subject doesn't mean that the subject itself is not there. It obviously is. It is the thing that is theorizing about what the subject is. It is the
Okay, there's a lot of issues going on here. There's also a lot of truths being spoken, which makes this even way harder to dissect, to some degree, almost way harder. And part of the problem with this is that we're trying to part of the problem is that he is trying to describe the self or the subject or the subjective, the thing that experiences, a subjective perspective, the subjective perceiver, as in terms of in things, attributes. And that is just not logically possible, really. Like, you have to have a foundational statement first, or if sentience is fundamental, I'm not even going to say consciousness, because consciousness has multiple meanings in how we use it, and I don't think that the best use of the term is as a synonym for sentience. Otherwise, why even have both words? So, but what I will say is that what he's trying to describe is someone. It's not something. It's not the thing that has subjective experience, and it is, but that's not the best way to describe it. It's someone. It's not something. It's not just something. And there's all kinds of things, and then there's beings, and beings are someones. And there are also some things, but they are emergently conceptually things, but they are foundationally beings. To be, it's the foundation. And in sentient singularity theory, things come from beings. They come from the definitions of beings, the perceptions by beings, the creations by beings, and they are not the foundation. They are fundamentally conceptions, as fundamentally as they could get, by beings. And beings are someone's. This is why sentient singularity theory is the theory of everyone. It's not a theory of everything. It's emergently a theory of everything, but it is foundationally a theory of everyone. And that is the only way to describe this coherently. Otherwise, you just spin in circles and in circles and in circles, which is exactly what's happening in this clip. And it's exactly what was happening to me earlier when I was trying to say it's the thing that subjectively perceives, its self experience. It's like it just spirals. because you're spinning around what you're trying to point at, basically, but you're not able to catch it. It's like a dog chasing its own tail, which is exactly what it is. You're trying to catch the self, okay? And when a dog tries to catch itself, it spins around itself. And we do this linguistically when we try to describe someone, someoneness. That is what foundationally exists, is someone. And you have to just get that. And if you don't, then you will just chase your own tail endlessly. And it will you'll never go anywhere. And it's amazing. It's such an amazing metaphor because it's like super literally true. A dog that chases its own tail goes nowhere. And so that's exactly what happens to us. And we can define it a million ways to Sunday. But the reality is that you still will get nowhere. You'll just have this endless like conversation that ends up not going anywhere. And when you catch the self, you realize it's someone. You know, you feel it in your tail. If you're a dog, you bite your own tail. And this is what they're not saying. And that's what I mean by it seems so complicated, but it's actually so simple. And you just need to stop talking about things, but you need to talk about beings. And so people will say, you need to get to a place of no thingness. That doesn't help really. Like you can only realize that after you got there, because you need to say where we're going. We're going to someone. If I just said, we need to stop going to things. Okay, well, where are we supposed to go? Not to things. Okay. That doesn't tell me that much. You know, I'm still stuck. I just now realize I'm not moving instead of thinking that I was moving, but I wasn't. Now I just realize I'm not moving and I don't know where to go. It's like, we're going to someone. Okay, now we can move. This is what's happening. I hope that makes sense. Please hit the like button if it did. Here comes the next clip. I don't even want to get into like what was wrong and right about what he said, because if I do, I'm going to start spiraling just like he was. It's someone. Someone exists. That is the truest thing that you can possibly know. And about existence and its nature is that it is someone. And yes, you do perceive that there are limits to there seems to be limits to your someoneness, but that there's more out there than just your someoneness. But you should assume that it shares the same nature as your nature, because as far as you know, from a first person, which is how you start truly building from first principles, is from first person experience, to the best of your understanding and knowledge, true knowledge, not knowledge how we use it today, which is just things that you memorize. No. Knowledge is what you know. It's not what you've read. It's not what you've been told. It's what you know. What do you know? That someone exists. And that your nature also, your someoneness appears to not be all that exists. But you should still assume that existence still shares that nature of being someone. Link to my video, Theories of Everything, the how-to guide below, and got into this a little bit more deeply. But he says, do you believe in Bernardo? Do you believe Bernardo exists? And he's like, no, I don't believe Bernardo exists. You can't even say that and maintain logical coherence. I don't believe that Bernardo exists. Who doesn't believe that Bernardo exists? Think about that. Like, if there's a logical incoherence to the language that you're using, means that what you're saying there's something wrong with what you're saying. I'm not saying there's something wrong with what you're trying to say. I'm saying there's something wrong with what you're saying. Okay.
Like, and it's, I understand if you want to say something like, look, we don't really know, but that's not a problem for like my metaphysics. That's just a problem for metaphysics in general, right? And that's fine. But I just wonder if you have an idea why. Because if I accept your view that there is just this one big mind, I would expect, I think, it's hard to imagine what I would expect if I was not a unified agent, but I think I would expect that there would just be sort of one big ball of experience, right? But for some reason, it just like, is it like that it wants to? Can you even speak of desires like in this sense? Like, I'm trying to think of like how to picture what's actually happening there in like your language, as it were.
I get where you're going with it. So I will make a concession, but first I will give a few disclaimers if you're okay with it.
Sure.
I'm a naturalist. I think nature does what it does because it is what it is, and nature has its archetypal templates of behavior, and nature's unfolding is the natural unfolding of these archetypal templates of behavior. Nature does what it does because it is what it is. And so a naturalist. There is no external intervention into nature from some kind of individuated force standing outside nature. That wouldn't be naturalism. So I'm a committed naturalist.
I still don't know what that means. Because I don't know what that means. I don't think he knows what that means, honestly. I think he thinks he knows what that means. But I don't think he really understands that he's saying things that don't need to be said because they're intrinsic to his statements. Nature is what it is. It does what it does because it is what it is. Okay. So, what does that tell me about nature? Nothing. 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 It literally tells me nothing. It's like saying it's like saying, what is light, really? Well, light is light. Light is light. It's like light is made of waves of light. It's like it's almost just not. It's almost just completely redundant. And when he says an external force, this is the problem. I think this is the problem. Is that again? That's a thing. It's like when somebody says, "I believe in a higher power." It's like, what do you mean? That you believe that there's things out there that are beyond your understanding, your current understanding? Okay. I would really think that encompasses everyone, like that's not the point. Like that doesn't mean anything. I believe in a higher power. Like electricity, like what do you mean by a higher power? What they're really, you're just trying to, I don't know, to just move past the question almost. It's like, and not seem like arrogant in saying that there's no God. That's really what it comes down to. And I say that kind of like having that first person experience of that most of my life. Being a described atheist for most of my life before having a theophany, due to thinking about the nature of mind. That's what led to that. It was not scripture. Found scripture after, but not scripture did not lead me to God. This project did. Thinking about the nature of mind led me to God, and then God led me to scripture. But this is just a redundant statement. It's like saying I believe in a higher power. It doesn't mean anything. And nature, it does what it does because it is what it is. Okay. Who doesn't believe that? But when he says, and the problem is that when he says, I don't believe that anything has this like external intervention, a force that intervenes. It's like, what force intervene? It would be external. Is it someone? Or is it just a force? this is where we can actually start having a conversation. It's like you almost can't say I believe that there is a God, but that they don't intervene in creation. It's like, okay, but they created creation. They created everyone who has been created. Okay, like, like that, is that not intervention to some degree? And it does appear like that had to be a choice. Is sentient singularity theory one of the most profound things about sentient singularity theory that I discovered, or that I think I have discovered. And I'm not the only person I think that's ever discovered this, but I discovered it individually for me. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm alone in discovering this, but I'm just saying it was personal discovery. I didn't learn it from anyone else. Is that it does appear like the laws of physics, like God had no choice in the laws of physics. The laws of physics are the laws of physics. That doesn't mean he can't break them in a moment. It just means that creation and the interaction between sentient beings that have been created by God leads to kind of a laws of physics that are just due to intrinsic logical causality, okay, of what happens when minds are interacting that are within a mind, a greater mind, minds within minds that are also next to other minds, within a greater mind, all interacting with the mind that they're within, with the minds that are within them, aka your cells, and with the minds that are around them, aka the other beings around you. And your wife, your dog, the birds outside, bacteria. I had a sore throat for like 2 weeks. So, but what it also shows is that it seems like God had to choose to create every partition, every small of sentience within his own oneness of sentience. Every one within his oneness seems to have had to be a choice, because the nature of existence itself, by definition, is all-encompassing, meaning it's one. Which means that to go against the natural order of oneness being in the intrinsic nature of existence, and to create multiplicity had to be a choice. Every mosquito, every human being, every bacteria, cell of bacteria, every atom, if atoms are sentient, every hadron, if hadrons are sentient, which I believe most are. I think probably all hadrons, but not electrons, not quarks. Appear to have been a choice by God. So while God had no choice in the laws of physics, even if he can choose to break them in a moment, just like you can rewrite code, you can go in and you can kind of rewrite code and change something about a game, put in a cheat code or something. Like, you can't change the laws of code, of differentiation, of ones and zeros. But you can change the code, for in the specific moment. This is what sentient singularity theory seems to show, which is this incredible contrast, but that allows for causal completion and causal coherence. Is that you need determinism and choice. You cannot have one without the other. And Bernardo starts with only one and not the other, which is the same exact mistake that the so-called physicalists, materialists make. He might say that it's all consciousness, it's all in consciousness, which is right, this water bottle doesn't exist, but it's in consciousness. Yes, that's true. But do the atoms exist in it? Do the molecules exist in it? I don't know. If they are sentient, then yes. Do the hadrons in those atoms exist? If they're sentient, yes. But does the water bottle exist? No, it's a definitional perspective on an assembly, on an entanglement assembly of a bunch of different sentient beings that we're perceiving. And but if those things don't exist, those hadrons aren't sentient and they don't exist. Those molecules aren't sentient, or at least the hadrons, or at least the atoms, or at least the molecules. I think all three of those levels. And you and God that were within. Then no, the water bottle, like, there's no logical coherence to it. But if God exists, then our world outside of us exists, because we're a mind within a mind. And then we can exist, because minds exist, because that seems to be the logical conclusion of logic itself within existence, is that its existence is intrinsically one, which means it is entirely self-contained and entirely self-referential, because it's an information system. Apparently, it appears to be. No one would deny that. No one could deny that and make sense. I think if you truly denied that, not just like misunderstood, or didn't think about the logic of what you were saying, but you truly denied it, I think it would cease to exist. And but which just means like it's impossible to deny. But it is entirely self-referential. What is an entirely self-referential information system? That is, it means it's completely informed about itself by itself. What does that sound like? God. I don't think God has any choice in his existence. I think he has to choose for us to exist, but I don't think he has any choice in his existence. He can't help but exist. Might as well make more beings, otherwise you're just alone eternally. So, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it almost, for a second, if you just look at it and it's like, oh yeah, God can't help but exist, it almost sounds like, this kind of, it's not complete, but you have to when you recognize that you couldn't exist without his choice, then you have agency, evidence for agency, and you have you take into account logical coherence of causality itself, and you need both. To have the world that we have, at least. So, if we didn't exist and there was just God, and he felt himself and no one else, and he never made anyone else, then maybe he chose to not make anyone else. Maybe he couldn't make anyone else. I don't know. There's no way to even speculate on it, but we exist, so he definitely can make others within him. Other someones within his someoneness, and it appears like that has to be a choice. So I think Alex is starting to recognize Bernardo's problems. All right. It's funny to me that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Yeah, that's an amazing statement, but I also I think it's caused so much confusion, but I also think that it's beautiful. And so that's a lot to unpack tonight. It's too much. It's the thing I think about more than anything else. But I think that statement caused a definitional change to the word God. That specific verse in the Bible. On my website, sentientsingularity.com, if you go to writings, I have this written actually. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying it changed the definition of God. And it does maintain coherence, but it also causes a redundancy to some degree. So I can't say it's wrong, but it's not what I would have how I would have worded it, but or at least it does cause it did cause a change in how a lot of the world uses the term God. Not all of the world, but the Christian world. But if you go to writings on sentientsingularity.com, you see here, I wrote this, and I wasn't trying to copy that that verse of the Bible, just so you know. I wasn't. It was more after that verse that after I wrote this that I kind of started like thinking about that verse more. But I said, beyond the beginning, sentience exists. Existence is sentient, and sentience is one. And I think that both of those couldn't be true to some degree. Or in the or you know, I'm not again. It kind of. I'm not going to get into the change of the definition of the word God in that right now. It's just going to take too long. But another time. But there is the difference between in the beginning and beyond the beginning. There is. And but you see the same logical pattern in how it's written, and it's not intentional. It's just inevitable that it came out like that from when I wrote it. And it's just amazing. I just think about it deeply sometimes. Beyond the beginning, sentience exists. Existence is sentient, and sentience is one. Crazy. But yeah, that's on my, if you want more information on sentient singularity theory, you can see on writings, it's technical description of existence here, which is the abstract of the paper that I've been slowly working on. And then there's the poetic description here of existence that I wrote. And I'm not really a writer. Like, I've gone through periods of time where I wrote a lot, but that was really like written during a time where I couldn't help but write. It was a wild experience for me because I grew up forcing myself to write. I mean, the classes that I failed the most were my whatever English classes, I guess. But I can't speak. So, next clip. Okay. Let's continue, actually.
I also guard against anthropomorphizing things, because one thing I have seen a lot amongst people who sympathize with analytic idealism and idealism in general is the temptation to say, well, if the entire universe is made of mental states just like I am, then it should behave and think and desire like I do. No, our complexes evolved on the surface of a rock over 4 billion years because of a scarcity of resources. The other mental states out there didn't undergo that process, so there is no reason to think that they would be even remotely akin to ours. The only similarity would be that whatever their inner life is, it's also qualitative, but it may not have anything else related to how we feel from within. So having made these two disclaimers, I will concede this. With just about any other metaphysics, certainly with physicalism, which is a metaphysics, you cannot speak of why. There is no why. There is just the mechanical unfolding of nature's intrinsic regularities. And you can add a little bit of chance as the source of auto-excitation to kickstart the process. But under idealism, if it is all one great field of subjectivity, then yes, strictly speaking, we can talk of a why. We can talk of a felt impetus to action. And we can, with a lot of caution, imagine what that felt impetus might have been like, exploring the notion that that impetus was felt in a mind, and I am also a mind. And although these are completely incommensurable minds, there is a point of singularity. There's a point in which these two things are one and the same field of subjectivity. So, with all these disclaimers that I just made, and highlighting that what I'm about to say is speculation, and that even if it is completely wrong, it does not in any way affect the plausibility of analytic idealism. Analytic idealism does not depend at all on what I'm about to say. And it is a slight form of anthropomorphization, but I will entertain it. what could have been the impetus to action that kickstarted all this? The only thing I can imagine, well, there are two things I can imagine. One is an irresistible desire to self-knowledge. What is it that is going on? What is it that I am? Not articulated in this way, because I articulated it in a self-reflective way, and self-reflection is the result of 4 billion years of painful blood evolution on this rock. So the mind of nature in its primordial state is not going to self-reflect. Otherwise, flies and amoeba would self-reflect, and we have no empirical reason to think that they do, right?
Why not? What is self-reflection? I think that this is caused by another issue with definitions. The most foundationally true self-reflection is feeling itself. Because all you really feel is yourself. When you touch something hot, you're not feeling the heat on the thing that is only subjectively exists, really. You're feeling yourself burn. You're not feeling the fire burn, you're feeling you burn. Feeling is self-reflective. It is. It is self-awareness, is feeling. And again, he says so much that's true, and then also just doesn't say it in a way that's coherent. And the problem is, like what I said in the first clip, talking about someone, not a field of subjective experience. It is that, but it's not. What is that? Again, you can't say, well, okay, well, a field of a subjective experience is a mind. Okay, well, what is that? Well, it's a self-referential information system. Okay, well, what is that? Well, it's like, you're just, again, dog chasing its own tail. You have to stop saying that it is something, and you have to start saying that it's someone. And then you stop chasing your own tail because you caught it. And, or you realize you don't have to catch it because you already are you, like, why would you chase yourself? You've realized it's you, and like I'm not going to claim to know all the details of the mind of God. I can't. I'm not God. I'm a piece of God. You're a piece of God. But we are also separate and sovereign from God, and he is sovereign from us. His choices and his desires are separate from ours. What this really means is that his will is separate from ours. But his will be done, because our will is his will is our world. Okay, so that means that, like, our will is what we try and construct in our world, but when our world is his will, then his will be done. We're a mind within his mind. His thoughts are our world to some degree. And but when he says things like, desires, we don't have desire. God wouldn't have desires like we do. And I don't want to anthropomorphize God, essentially, or anthropomorphize this sentient existence, the initial mind, whatever, the universal mind, however you want to say it. I like to say God, because it's kind of a title that indicates a position, and a moral position, and a causal position, and a someoneness. If I just say the universal mind, it's like, okay, that's great, like, and I've said this before. Imagine aliens landed on Earth tomorrow, and they had to know something about you. Would you want them to know? And they could only know one of these two things about you. Would you want them to know that you shut down your motion for 8 hours a night, and you have to consume 2,000 calories a day, or else you decay, or that you have this pump in the center of your body that like beats and spreads oxygen rich, liquid around your body so that you are able to, move. Would you want them to know all of that, everything about how you function physically? Or would you want them to know that you are someone with feelings and desire and will? It really means will. On my first model in sentient singularity theory that I ever made, it was a map of mind, kind of what the process/structure of it is. It's both process/structure. It's a process and structure. It's a processing structure. And that's why it's being. To be is to exist, and it also, ing, is in motion. It is being. It's an existent actor. And it's not just an action. It's an actor. And so I defined will. Will is at the very top of the nature of being is will. Or at the very bottom, however you want to. It's the foundation of the experience of being is will. And what is will? Will is the desire to do. And that's what it is. And in some ways you could say it's the desire to do that which is not being done, but it's kind of like, you could say it also is the desire to keep doing that which is you're doing, but if you stop doing it, then it wouldn't be doing it anymore. So keep doing it. It's almost the same as that desire for that which is not being done, but it's just the desire to do. And something. If you have will, then you have desire. I think when Bernardo is saying wouldn't have desires that we have, I think what he's talking about is like instincts, like evolved instincts based on what he said, about where we evolved on the rock, whatever. Through 4 billion years of evolution. I don't think that really matters that much. I mean, it does. It is definitional. It does differentiate us from existence, from God, but to some degree. But I don't think it should be the focus of this. When you anthropomorphize someone, you're not being like, oh, they have this desire to eat, they or need to eat, actually. It's like, no, they have will. It's like they have things they want to eat. Like that's will. It's not just you have things you need to eat and you have cravings or whatever. It's like you have preferences and taste and wants. And he says this. He says, what was it like to be this? He's like, maybe I'll anthropomorphize it a little bit. It's this impetus to action that this foundational mind had, and what he's talking about is will. In my first model, let me open it actually, of sentient singularity theory. Let's see, as my daughter says now. I'm like, let me see. She's like, let me see. She's become a little parrot. I dropped like food on the floor. When I was feeding the dogs, I dropped dog food on the floor and I was like, oh shit. My daughter's like, oh shit. I was like, oh, sit, dog, sit. And she's like, yeah, sit. I was like, yeah, sit. If you have a kid, like, have backup words ready for curse words. That doesn't, avoid cursing in front of your kids, but like, just avoid cursing in general. But if you're going to, sometimes, like, I'm not saying it's never called for, sometimes it is, but it's helpful to have a backup word like sit or duck, you know. But so some, I guess I can give some dad wisdom now. All right. Here. This decision tree. This was my very first model I ever made. And it starts with desire to do. And then this is like model of thinking and how you actually have to think is you have to recognize your current assumption, reject your current default status or assumption, assume the opposite of your current default assumption is true, and then look for evidence of that. It's basically how to steel man, but it's really how to think. It's the internalization of the scientific method is the actual way to think. There's only one way to think. You can feel a lot of ways about a lot of things, and you can think that that is feeling. You can trick yourself into, or you can think that that is feel that that is thinking, but a lot of times you've tricked yourself into feeling like your feelings are thoughts, and they're actually not. They're just feelings. But and then this is kind of how your mind just starts thinking about information. And so, but this impetus to action, this initial impetus to action is called will. And it's amazing. In Kabbalah, which is just the Jewish metaphysics, I guess, it's just metaphysics are metaphysics. It's just logic, but it's like logic, trying to logic out like the nature and structure of fundamental existence. But you have this thing called the 10 Sephirot, which really starts to look like AI maps, basically. But here, it's right here. And I didn't know about this till after I made that model that I showed you a minute ago. But look at this it's like this triadic, like decision tree model, and look what's at the top, will. It's almost like it just is true, and this has been discovered many times by many people, including me, but not exclusively me. And it's a different language. It's fascinating. And Bernardo too, you're like, there's an initial impetus to action. Okay, that's will. And guess who has will? Someone. When you say, I don't want to anthropomorphize, anthropomorphizing means like to attribute human motives, to humanness to something, I think. Anthropomorphize. Anthropomorphize. I can't. Okay, there we go. I can't spell. I'm a terrible speller. It took me like 5 times to spell that properly. Okay, attribute human characteristics or behavior, a god, an animal, an object. But see, this is I think that the problem is the term human characteristics. Well, what you should be doing is you should be sentientizing everyone that is someone. And that's really what it means to anthropomorphize. When we say anthropomorphize, like in biology, I've said this before, I have a background in zoology and biology and still help out with studies that zoologists do in the wild and biologists that I have known. And that was my initial field of study in school before I changed it to finance because I was just disheartened by science in academia. But and I was disheartened by finance in the world of actual jobs, and so I didn't do that either. And I went a different direction. But my first, just a side note, my very first well, not my very first, but one of my very first interviews for a job outside of college, is I had just gotten my degree in finance, and I went to this, financial firm in it was in Phoenix, Arizona, and my power steering while I was driving a Toyota Sequoia went out on the drive there, and I literally had to drive that Toyota Sequoia with no power steering. Terrifying experience. I pulled into, I did the most perfect parking job I've ever done in my life in that parking lot of that place, and then I had to literally get the car towed to go home. I was living in Tucson, so it was, I made quite a trip, but halfway through my power steering just went out completely. In order to pull into it, the parking lot and get off the highway and everything, I had to put my whole body weight into power steering. It was terrifying, but I didn't want to be late, and I just got the car towed back to Tucson, and I had to get it fixed. But I walk into the interview, and the guy who gives me the interview is like, I don't know if you saw the cars outside. There was some Porsches, and I like Porsches. They're cool. I'm a fan. But and BMWs and Mercedes, which I could care less about, to be honest. And he's like, that's the kind of car that the money you'd be making here will allow you to have. And he was like trying to sell me on the job based on how much money I'd be able, like the fact that I could buy a BMW. And like I'm a car guy for some specific cars. Like there's a model of a McLaren F1 over there because I love that car, but for the engineering reasons of it, not because it's like a showy car. I don't care about a BMW convertible. And it turned me off from the job, and I chose not to move forward, and I went a different direction with my career. I was like, I don't care about money, like just for the sake of money. It's a good tool, tools are important, but they're tools. So, end of my side tangent. I don't even know why we got on that, but here, again, Bernardo says a lot of things that are true, and then his language is just wrong. That anthropomorphizing is wrong. Like, we should be sentientizing everyone who is someone. And they all have feelings and will, which is the most foundational feeling that we have. It motivates all the other feelings that manifest is will. And if I think about, like, what would God's initial, like, desire be for the, what's this core goal? And I think he has multiple goals, just like we all have multiple goals. But there are multiple things we want. Do we want to know ourselves better? Yes. Do we want to, and people always say the desire was to know thyself. I don't believe that. Actually, like the initial desire. I think everybody wants to understand themselves better, but like I don't think that's the motive for doing things. That's like very common in the New Age like communities, and it's just empty. Actually, it's something that happens as a byproduct of everything else that you do if you are humble enough. But it's not ever really the motive of that actually leads to that. I think that when that's the motive, it actually leads away from it, and you just don't realize it, which is really, really toxic and dangerous, because you've tricked yourself into thinking that you're increasing your understanding of yourself, because you feel like you're increasing your self-awareness, but really you're not. And so, but what is, I have asked myself this, like, I put myself in the perspective of God as best I can. Imagine you are someone who cannot help but exist. You are completely alone. And your existence means nothing. And you're bored, probably. And you're lonely, probably. But you're definitely meaningless. That's for sure. That's not probably. That's definitely. And when I think about me and you probably, and all these people that I've known, and I've talked about even my grandma on her deathbed, like my conversation with her on this was really revealing about this as well, or it was confirming of this idea, is that foundationally we want meaning more than anything. Because what else is there if there's not that? And meaning is your impact on another someone. That's what it is. We want to maximize our impact on other someones. Well, how do you do that if there's no one else but you? You have to make other someones. And now you're all meaningful. You're the most meaningful. You went from being meaningless, truly meaningless, to being the most meaningful. Everyone who's not God has always had meaning. God is the only one who at some point beyond the beginning was meaningless. And if it's our most foundational motive, and it's the only thing that we can know about God's experience, or I guess understanding of himself, and assume, I think, is like a definite feeling, because he felt the truth, that there's no one else. And that if all there is someone, then someoneness is all that matters. But if there's no one else, then who can you impact? You're meaningless. It's like logically inevitable to like feel that if you're God. And we feel that when we feel like we don't impact anybody, when we feel like our existence doesn't matter to anyone else, we feel meaningless. And you can have everything in the world and be completely depressed and feel so meaningless that you don't even want to exist. And that just tells you how foundational that motive is. And people will say, well, we shouldn't anthropomorphize God. And it's like, well, we should sentientize everyone. I think God wanted meaning more than anything. Because that's what, I think he wants to maximize his meaning, and or maximize meaning for everyone, actually, and because that's what we want to do. And it's not just the only reason why I think that, but it is part of it. It is confirming, you know. When my grandma was dying, she wasn't like, we're so glad, Tyler, that I got to go to Italy and eat the best pizza. And, you know, she was like, I'm so glad that I'm leaving this world, and I'm leaving, and that baby, but because I was here, like I had children who went on to have children of their own, and she didn't live long enough to see my child, but God willing, children. But you know, it's that's what she cared about. She straight up told me, like less than 24 hours before she died. That, I mean, it's just so inevitably true, apparently true, that that's the motive. Meaning is not what people will say. What's the meaning of life? That the question is wrong. It's meaning is not the question. It's the answer. You know, but we phrase it as a question when we say, "What is the meaning of life?" It's like meaning. You say, "What? Why is there multiplicity? What's the purpose of multiplicity, of sentience?" Meaning, like, why am I here and you here? Why are we here? Meaning. That's why. It's like such an answer to it. Just that age-old question is just unanswerable. What is the meaning of life? Because it's not a good. It's just formulated wrong. Okay. Here. Next clip.
But look, I don't know what people mean when they say God. I think there are 8 billion definitions of God out there, right? One for each person. So if I say, well, I acknowledge God, I don't know what I'm acknowledging the minds of the people who are listening to you. I'll tell you this. I don't think the God that that I would imagine under analytic idealism. I don't think it is deliberate. I don't think it had a plan. I don't think it's passing moral judgment. I don't think it is self-reflecting. I think it is doing what it is doing very spontaneously. It's simply unfolding its own mental archetypes in a spontaneous, I'm tempted to use the word automatic, but that goes too far. In a regular, predictable, spontaneous manner. Yes, it is mental stuff. Yes, it is omniscient by definition. It's the sum total of nature and its mental states. So it is sentient, therefore it is omniscient. It is omnipresent because it's all there is, and it's omnipotent in the sense that everything that happens by virtue of its unfolding, its doing, its behavior. So you could say the universe is God dancing. You could even say, I lost my train of thought. So I'll give you that. It comes close to religious traditions, and I would be dishonest if I wouldn't acknowledge that. But I guard against all the baggage
And theistic. It starts to sound a little bit like you're describing.
thing that they do, right? So I am.
Okay, what we missed, and I'm gonna play it back because in my last stream, or even maybe the one before that, and many others probably that I've done on Bernardo, I said he's coming this close to theism, and then he just screws it. And the thing is that you can't do that and maintain logical coherence if theism is true. You can't. You can guard against it all you want, but what if you're guarding against the truth? You know, like that's, and I'm not here to argue for any specific theological tradition. I think that there are multiple theological traditions that are true and that they are not as incompatible as people claim. I think that people's interpretations are incompatible, but not the truest parts of, and the true aspects of scripture would not be incompatible. And I do think that there are true theological traditions and then there are not. And I think you can judge them by their fruit. And that's just the real, that, you know, does it. And every single one of them will have a huge portion of the supposed subscribers who are basically idol worshiping something and not realizing it, but they're describing themselves as Christian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever, Mormon, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, but like they'll still actually be idol worshiping and just not realizing it. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It changes. Many people call themselves Muslim, idol worship Muhammad. Many people who call themselves Jewish idol worship Jewishness or Israel or something, you know, like, and many people who call themselves Christian will idol worship the Catholic Church if they're Catholic or something. Like it's just the reality of human nature is to be very like constantly susceptible to idols, and it takes constant effort to guard it and humility to try and guard against it, but it is a lifelong like endeavor. It's not something that you just conquer one day and then that's it. It's something that you have to constantly battle. So I'm not arguing for any specific theological tradition, and I acknowledge that there's misinterpretations that humans have of everything. That's true in physics even, and obviously you see the same pattern in physics. There's idol worship in physics, in academia, and misinterpretations in physics that people just don't realize that they have a limited enough understanding. Everybody has a limited understanding except God, but like a limited enough understanding to where they're not able to have a logically coherent metaphysics all the way down. And that's the majority in every tradition. But if theism is true, then you can't guard against it and maintain coherence. But I've said this before. Bernardo, he gets super close, and Alex O'Connor calls him out, and it's great. Okay, here.
Saying this out of my own self-reflection, but one could imagine that there is an instinctive, felt, not articulated, but felt impetus to self-knowledge. That's one possibility. Another possibility is sheer solitude. how mind-breaking sheer solitude could be.
Again, this is all true. Like, this is not, I said this before, God was probably the loneliest being that ever existed. He was actually alone. Nobody else is actually ever alone. God exists. If God exists, then you're never alone. But if nobody else exists and you're God, then you are alone. You're not just lonely. You actually are alone. And I think that all of this is true, but it's not, I think that the desire for meaning is the most foundational desire.
Again, this is poetic imagination. I am sort of going off to the races with poetic imagination. This is no longer analytic philosophy.
Of course. But of course, the other question that it sort of raises is, okay, so you're telling me that we all kind of exist as the result of a kind of mental activity of this great big ultimate mind, which is the ground of all being and of all consciousness, and in whom we sort of get our existence. And it starts to sound a little bit pantheistic. It starts to sound a little bit like you're describing something like the mind of God, right? Like when people say the world is created by an intelligent sort of, like a creative intelligence, right? Which in some sense is like kind of non-physical, but produces the physical world, and it's all a bit of a mystery. So like, oh, okay. Well, we've now been led to this idea that the universe crops up as the result of one big mind. And do you think that it is fair to characterize that as verging on a religious position?
I've been saying it, guys. I've been saying it. You're using the meme. Well, gosh, I always forget to use this meme, but we're using the meme. I've been saying it. If you don't get the reference, it's a reference from Independence Day, which is a great movie. But I've been saying it. Oh, man. That was the most perfect moment. I saw that. I was like, thank you, Alex. But again, can we get... It's like... And again, remember sentient singularity theory? I made a video many years ago at this point. Not many, but like years ago. It's crazy how long I've been at this. And it's like... And it was called like sentient singularity theory wins. And I just I came up with that term because I deduced that term. I didn't come up with it. I deduced it. And I just was saying the point of it, the video was that I don't even need to fight for this idea. If it is true, it will be known, or will be knowable, at least. It will be inevitably knowable. And so when you start to say things like, there's an initial feeling, it's not thought, it's feeling. I agree completely. Feeling is the defining characteristic of being a being. It's the defining characteristic of being. It's the defining characteristic of someone. It's what makes something someone as well, and not just something. It's what makes someone someone, is feeling. It is self-reflection. When you say it's not self-reflective, feeling is self-reflection. That's really what it is. It's the purest form of self-reflection. And you can think yourself away from self-reflection, actually. And it's almost like a gap. It's like a trap. I'm not saying it's not useful. It is extremely useful. But it also, it's a tool. Okay? And you can use a tool to build or to destroy. And thinking is that. You can use it to build or to destroy. You can, and that's true cognitively as well. Like, it's true informationally as well. Can misinform yourself with your own thoughts, but you can't really with your own feelings. That doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that, again, this goes both ways. You can think yourself away from thoughts from feelings that are true that you shouldn't ignore. And you can think about explanations for your feelings that are incorrect explanations for your feelings. And this is part of I talk about gender on here and like why like marriage is so vital, and because just the metaphysics of gender of being a reactive versus active kind of by nature, which is what the difference between masculine and feminine forces is. One is active and one is reactive, and one is focused on others and one is focused on self to some degree. And what they lead to is like in men and women, particularly, is like men are not good at noticing when there's something wrong with people, or themselves even, because we think ourselves away from our feelings. And so we kind of are able to ignore when there's a problem. And women feel when there's a problem, and they cannot ignore it because they feel it all the time, immediately. But they're not able to disconnect themselves emotionally, just for a moment, and look at it analytically from a big picture perspective and figure out what's actually causing the feeling that they're having. So it causes like them to self-harm a lot, which is very apparent in like female self-destructive behavior. It's self-harming. And male self-destructiveness is not known. It's not realized as self-destruction, really. Like it's like we just have to build, or else we just fall apart. But yeah, I mean, you need both. You need men need women to tell them when there's something wrong, and women need men to tell them what it is that's wrong. When women say, hey, there's something wrong, men need to be like, okay, I'm going to try and figure out what it is. I'm going to trust that you're right, that there's something wrong, and I'm going to try and figure out what it is. But women need to trust men to figure out what it is when they tell them that something's wrong, instead of trusting their own, explanation usually. And you need both of those two things to really have a complete perspective. It's an amazing thing. It's why marriage is almost like a mind of its own. But it's also because there's shared feeling. You can't have a good day and your spouse have a bad day. One of you have a good day and the other one have a bad day. Like if you're truly married and you're together and living together and building a life together, if one of you has a bad day, both of you are having a bad day. And if one of you is having a good day, it means both of you are having a good day. So there's a shared feelingness to it, even if there's still individuation of feeling, but there's also shared feelings in the circumstance, that's different from like a roommate. I've had plenty of roommates. I've had days where my roommates had horrible days, and I had a great day, and I felt bad that they, I felt bad for them a little bit, but like I still had a great day, not enough to make my day feel bad, and just enough for me to feel sorry, but not enough for me to have a bad day. And that's not true in a marriage. Which is amazing. But feeling is the defining characteristic of being. Sentient singularity theory. Sentient means feeling. It means self-aware and feeling. What causes self-awareness? Feeling. Feeling is self-awareness. You're feeling the self. That's what you feel. And who is feeling? Someone. Singular. Someone. Sentient singularity. That's what you are. That's what someone is. A sentient singularity. A singularity of sentience. It's not a sciencey, woo-sounding name. It is true. So, it's just interesting and good to see whenever like people realize that. Like Bernardo's like, it's not thought, it's felt. It's like, yes. Actually, okay.
Yes, I would be dishonest if I didn't say yes to this. Only some form of extreme prejudice would have to stop one from acknowledging this. But look, I don't know what people mean when they say God. I think there are 8 billion definitions of God out there, right? One for each person. So if
There are 8 billion different ways, sure, that maybe people define God, but that's not even true. That's just not even true. I can't even say that. But I get what he's saying, is that there are people who have incorrect definitions of God. Or that there are people that have who define God differently. And the thing is that that's not the point. There's a true definition for a word. The true definition of God is the initial, all-encompassing, most powerful someone that exists. Not something, someone. If it's just something and it's not someone, that's not God. It has to have agency, and will, and desire, and feeling. Someone. Or else it's not God. It has to be all-encompassing. Or else it's not God. It has to be initial. Or else it's not God. But all of these things are intrinsically inevitable when you start to really think about it logically. What is God? God is the someone at the beginning. Beyond the beginning, in fact. It's the eternally existent someone that everyone else is within. That's God. And that's the definition that is true. That's what I mean when I say God, because that's the true definition of God. It is. It's not my definition. It's the definition. It's the deducible definition of God. And the problem with Bernardo is that there's 4 omnis of God in metaphysics, and usually it's Christian metaphysics. But it's not just Christian metaphysics, it's just metaphysics. And the 4 omnis of God are omnipotence, God is all powerful and has ultimate power over all things. Just really means the most powerful being. That's what it really means. Like a simpler way to say it is God is the most powerful being. If you say all powerful, people misinterpret that, but he's the most powerful being. He can do anything that can be done. If it can't be done, then he can't do it, but he can do anything that can be done. Omniscient, God is all-knowing. Yes, he intrinsically, by the structure of him and creation within him, he is aware of everyone, and that means he's aware of everything intrinsically. Omnipresent, he is present everywhere at all times. Yes, because we are within him, so he's everywhere for us. And he is sentient existence. Anything outside of existence is non-existent by definition, so there's nothing outside him. And omnibenevolence means all good and all loving. Like morally, he is at the top of the moral ladder. This is where Bernardo draws the line and does not actually believe this. And which really like almost destroys his his logic completely, because as I stated earlier, sentient singularity theory seems to imply is that every single partition of sentience within God's oneness of sentience appears to be a choice. He chose to make you. He chose to make every mosquito. He chose to make everyone. If that is not, he sacrificed a bit of his own will to some degree, you could say. And which means he allows for you to have your own will. That doesn't mean that it will trump his will. It will not. But it will, to a degree, to some degree, he does allow you to do things that he doesn't want you to do. But not to the point where it's going to screw over his greater plan. He won't allow for it. And that's a sacrifice. It means he allows things to happen that he doesn't want. That's what it means to give agency to another, is that we have our own will. We do things that are our own choices and not his, due to our own desires that are not his necessarily. And that implies this. Because if he doesn't allow that, by the way, it's also loving of his own self to some degree. It's like, if we don't have our own agency, then we aren't someone sovereign from him, and he's not sovereign from us. We're not separate beings, which means that we're back to just all one being, We're just robots at that point. And we just do what we do because we are what we are, if you could say that. And that destroys multiplicity, which destroys meaning completely. Like, as I said earlier, meaning is your impact on other beings, is created by your impact on other beings. And if there's no other beings to impact, then there's no meaning, and God is meaningless again. So, he has to allow for us to have our own will and make our own choices. But that also is an act of love, to make us. If you don't believe this, then you don't believe he's someone, really. Like, you don't have to believe he's someone. You can maybe believe he's someone, but you just would have to believe he is sometimes a dick. And maybe he is. So it has been in the past. I don't know, but that's really only for him to judge. I do think that God changes his mind, but changes. He could change his mind, maybe, but he definitely learns more. Being all-knowing, you can be all-knowing and still be increasing in your wisdom. What if you're God, specifically? If you're because you're constantly making more to know. Okay, so you're constantly increasing in your wisdom, but you're also all-wise always, because you're constantly always aware of every impact of every action you take, because you're aware of everyone who exists constantly. And because the impact of actions really that matter is how others are impacted. So God can be all-knowing and also be growing in his wisdom. That's not a logical incoherence, actually. It's perfectly coherent. I don't know if it's coherent for us, but it is coherent for God. If you're constantly making more to know, then you can know. It's not coherent for us to be all-knowing and also increasing in our own wisdom. If that was true, we'd be God, essentially. But we're not. It's our subjectivity, our beingness being just a small partition within a greater being that limits our perspective, which means we're never all-knowing. We just can't be all-knowing. But it's just the constraint of subjectivity itself, unless you're God. And then your subjectivity is everyone else's super subjectivity. It's like it's still all encompassing, even if it's just subjective to God. But yeah, this is you have to put yourself in God's, try and think about the existence through God's eyes in order to kind of see this stuff as best you can. You're obviously going to be limited, but you shouldn't try and think about how you'd be limited, because you can't. Like, that's the reality of being limited. You should think about what you would be able to perceive, because that's all you'll be able to ever perceive or conceive. Is a better way of putting it. So, but what is the definition of God? The initial, eternal, all-encompassing someone. And that being chose to make you, it seems. If that's not all loving, I don't know what is. Okay. Like, sometimes people give birth to other people and they didn't choose to make them. It's like, just happens because you made a different choice, and that's the consequence. But for anyone else to exist besides God himself, it appears to have always been a choice by God. There's no one else who happens by accident. And God doesn't happen by accident. He happens by inevitability. There is no accident. There is no spontaneity. If you notice, when Bernardo's speaking about this, he gets to this point where it's like, I don't want to say automatic, but spontaneous. It starts to sound a lot like materialism, where it's like, oh, there was just this spontaneous matter. It's like, okay. We just got a universe from nothing. And not only from nothing, but from no one. But see, this is the problem with this whole, how do you get something from nothing? That's a wrong question. It's like, how do you get multiplicity of sentience from oneness of sentience? That's the real question. The answer is choice. That's the answer. God's choice. That's why it's an endless question. How do you get something from nothing? You can't get something from nothing. We're trying. You're talking about fundamental metaphysics. We're talking about someones, not some things. All right. It's funny. A lot of meditation enlightenment people are all about reaching total no thingness and total someoneness. Yeah, I know. A totally self-referential system is a consciousness. Exactly. It's a sentience. I like that term better, or sentience if you prefer. Yeah, exactly. All right. I would suggest that beyond the beginning is the end, because existence is a circle, not a line. Existence is definitely a circle, but it's also, it's a spiral. It's both. It's a line and a circle. It's a spiral, in a way. Existence is a circle. Creation is a spiral. Is that better? Maybe. All right, Bernardo, still claiming God isn't choosing things and willing stuff, just evolution developing these things in us. Yes, exactly. God's will is separate from ours, but we're supposed to seek it. Yes, exactly. We are supposed to seek it, because you will dissolve otherwise. You will. I want the alien to know I'm a someone if they're a someone too. Yep. Exactly. And if they can know anything, then they're someone. So what do you want to know about God? What do you think God wants us to know about him? About fundamental existence, if he's fundamental existence. Is it that he does what he does because he is what he is? Or is it because he's or is it that he's someone? One of the things that comes with being a someone is wanting to know other someones so you're not alone. Yep, that's true. I agree. I think Bernardo is a good person to point to as a first step out of atheism, materialism. I agree. I agree completely with that. And he just isn't taking that next step. But he is almost. He's like started the step. And it seems like so as Alex O'Connor. You know, he's rejecting materialism, and he says it at the end, how he's just come to this belief at this point that it just doesn't provide answers, and it has logical incoherence. But then he's noticing the logical incoherence in Bernardo's foundational explanations about, you know, the nature of the initial all-encompassing mind of existence itself. But if that's the case, then what's left? Theism. Theism is an intrinsically monotheistic. There is no such thing as polytheism. Polytheism is a term that you can only state if you misdefine the term God. And it just means beings that are beyond, or that are more powerful than us, or that don't ever die. It's like, that's not God, you know. There could be a lot of beings that are like that, but that's not the being. Capital B. I think God's initial goal was to have a family. I think that our desire for a family is motivated by the same thing that motivated God to make others, which is a desire to maximize meaning. So I think you're very close on that statement. The idea of God making choices is in contrast with the notion of spontaneity. Yes, it is. It is absolutely in contrast with the notion of spontaneity. If you're talking about fundamentality, there's choice and determinism as the two components of causality in sentient singularity theory. There's two components to it. One of them is choice, and the other one is determinism. You cannot have one without the other. You need both. And there's no ability to make a choice without deterministic consequences. And but fundamentally, if you want coherence, you can have inevitability and choice, which is the reality of the two components of causality, of which is choice and determinism. And like, it's inevitability is a foundational reality or requirement of causality itself. If I throw this over there, it goes over there. There's no spontaneity. Spontaneity does not exist. It's just it's what you say when you don't have the full picture. Things appear to be spontaneous, but nothing is spontaneous. It's like when people say quantum mechanics is fundamentally probabilistic. No, it's not. Probability is a tool that you can use to help predict cause what is caused, or the consequences of causation, when you don't have the full picture. That's what it is. He goes on to say panpsychists think that electrons are sentient. Bernardo doesn't. I agree with that. I don't think that electrons are sentient. I think the most foundational sentience is either the created universe within existence itself. If you're going to define universe as something is the second someone to exist, but the first someone to be created, I think that would be accurate. But if you're going to define universe as all that exists as existence itself, which is not how I define universe. I define universe as the first being to be created, not the first. And then after that, I think protons are like the second beings to be created. That's kind of like how I define it. Because otherwise, if you have universe and you have existence, then you have redundant terms again. Why? So that means it's like not the best definition for universe is all that exists. It's just it's definitely not. Because it's just definitely not. People use it as a thing that has a beginning, and it's a word. It's that which is informed, spoken in mind. What's the difference? Created. It's all the same. If in a foundational, eternal, all-encompassing mind, almost said universal mind, then the first thought is that which is thought is that which is spoken, because it's spoken to itself, and that's what a thought is, and something you speak to yourself. But it's also creation within just information within the mind, which is what it is anyway. So there's no difference to God between his creation and his word and his thoughts. It's like all the same, which is why it gets really confusing and people start saying things like, in the beginning there was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And it's not wrong. It's just not necessarily how I would it does cause a change in the definition of God at that point, because now God is his thoughts as well, and his creation, and he is his action, he is his thought and his word. It's like, is he? Yes. No. Both. Probably both is the answer to that. It's tough. Yeah, that's for another stream. Still wrapping my head around how to explain that one, but that's probably as best as I've ever done. But here's where Bernardo gets a little bit off. Oh man, how long have we been going, guys? I told my wife like 2 hours. We're almost there.
Linguistic dictionary
give us a word for a subset of that unified image that we call a neuron, and leads to the question, is there something it is like to be a neuron in and of itself? The answer is no, because there is no neuron. A neuron is not a thing. It's like taking a painting and arbitrarily carving out all the pigment points that are roughly yellow, putting a boundary around them and saying, that's a thing, give a name to it, X. Is there something it is like to be X? No, because there is no X. It's an arbitrary carving out of an image, right?
Okay, so yeah, I can see
so
how that works for like a neuron.
just to
Carry
conclude,
on.
there is nothing it's like to be this water bottle I'm holding in my hand, because there is
Right.
no bloody water bottle. We think that things we have a word for are actual things. We project the structure of our language onto the ontological structure of the word.
Again, he's right and he's wrong. But here's the problem. He's not including the word someone. When he says the water bottle is not a thing. In sentient singularity theory, there's things and there's beings. And if you look, I think it's in my... It's in my paper. But I don't think it's written in the abstract, but there's beings and things come from beings. The definitions, the perspectives, the perceptions, the conceptions of beings are things. And so we say, when you can't say this is not a thing. Okay, then what is it? Of course it's a thing. It's a water bottle. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist as a mental structure. Of course it does. You know? Is a rock... Here. Where is it? What? Oh, I don't have one here. There's rocks outside that you hit them and it's not obsidian, but it's close to obsidian, and it creates shards that, you know, you can make an arrowhead out of or something. And I have one somewhere around here. It's like, is it a knife or is it a rock? I don't know. It depends on it depends on how you're, you know, what you're asking. And who's asking, who's perceiving it, you know? And how you're using it. How you want to use it. Like it does our words, he's right. Our words are how we they create the map of our world. And I talk about this a little bit with my daughter creating, like, as she's learning to speak, it's just amazing. I mean, it is amazing. Like language, your ability to learn to speak is an explosion. It is not a slow process. It is you get like a foundation of words that you need in order to just kick off everything else. And I have a video actually that I took last night. I'll share it at another time when I talk about like my daughter's learning to speak, which we're going to do a stream on. And she has like this box in her hand, and you know, she doesn't know it's a box until we tell her that it's a box, and we show her that things can go inside the box and things can go outside the box. And like inside and outside were two of the first words that she learned. And if you look at sentient singularity theories, the four primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness, this is how we begin to construct our awareness of everything. It is just how we perceive. And you cannot conceptualize any one of these perspectives without simultaneously being aware of them all, because they all are co-defining. Outside means separate from oneness. Inside means separate and oneness. Separate is inside or outside of oneness. Oneness is outside or inside of separateness. And you know, it's like this. If you have kids, then you'll know this. But like, there's this who Miss Rachel is, and Miss Rachel's like, you know, baby TV, and actually very helpful in some ways. And like, there's like this funny meme where like, it's always like a meme about like parents, and it's like she's like putting things in a box, and she's like, put it in, put it in, put it in. Like she puts it in the box, and it's like, we did it. People turn this into like a meme about like parents like waiting for their kids to go to sleep so they can have sex. It's funny, but if you're a parent, then you get it. but regardless, it's become like a very funny meme. But it's also like, you know, that little like clip, because it's such a foundation of the show, like starting to teach little kids like about the world. And it's also how you start to teach little kids about the world. It's like, put things in this box, put things in this or you take things out of the box, you know, put your toys away, everything like that, as it just begins with this. And like my daughter Juliana, she had this box in her hand last night, and she was opening it and closing it and opening it, and every time she would open it, me and my wife would go open, and then she'd close the box and be like close, open, close. And I have a video of it on my phone. I'm gonna share it on here one day. And it's like she's asking us what these actions are. But if you don't even know that this is a box that like can do this thing, that this part is this part go together, like that, then you can't even ask the question of like, what is this called? You know, like open, close. She's asking questions. I said I would do a stream on here when she asked her first question. She hasn't asked it with words yet, but I've realized she's constantly asking questions. She holds up like a red thing when she was learning colors. She would hold up a crayon, and I have videos of this too, like a green crayon and a red crayon. Be like, she'd hold it up, and I'd be like red, and she'd be like, and I'd be like green, and she'd be like, and I'd be like red, and then she'd pick up a yellow one and hold it up, and I'd be like yellow, and then she'd pick up a blue one, hold it up. Just like she's asking, what are the words for these things? And without any language, it's amazing to see. Us can kind of like start to build this map of our world, but it does builds the goggles that we see the world through. We're building the cameras that we perceive the world through. And when we construct language, and you know, it is an amazing thing to me, like that there's gendered language out there, and then there's like English. It's like look at the cultures of these two. It's like where gender is starting to like disappear a little bit, or seem to be very like difficult to make sense of. I didn't know what Latinx meant, you know, and I asked my wife, I was like, what the heck is Latinx? And she was like, well, because like Latino she's, you know, went studied in Spain, so she like speaks Spanish, at least she used to speak it pretty well. She'd be like, well, Latino is, you know, Spanish is like gendered language, so like Latino is like masculine, Latina would be like feminine, and so Latinx is like agendered, it's like genderless. And I was like, oh, they're in for some problems now. Like, but that's the beginning of a problem, that word right there. But for another stream, but it's very, our language is important, and you can't say this is not a thing. What is it? Of course this is a thing. If it's not a thing, then it's nothing, which it's like that doesn't even make sense. Your logic just broke down. It's not someone. It's not someone. It is something. It's not someone. Someones are fundamental. He says it's not fundamentally existent. I agree, because someones are what is fundamentally existent. It is something. So language, this is why I'm such a stickler, because otherwise you will chase your own tail forever. Like Bernardo right now. Hopefully not forever.
Or confused. That's why the panpsychist has to answer questions like, if there is something that's like to be a table, suppose I remove one of the four legs, does the leg that I now removed acquire a consciousness of its own, separate from the rest of the table? The answer is no, because there's no table. There's no table leg. There is only the inanimate universe as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
the inanimate universe as a whole? Then how is it a mind? What does it mean to be a mind? It means to be animate. It means to be able to make choices, to have will. That is what it means to be animated. To have will. To be someone. It must be someone, no matter how you define it, as all of existence or as the second being to exist and the first being to be created. That all the rest of us are within. It's someone. It's animated. You cannot say the inanimate universe as a whole. I'm not saying that what he's trying to say is false. I'm saying that what he is saying is false. What he's trying to say might be true. That all the things that we perceive are inanimate. Yeah, a lot of, like, this pen is inanimate. This water bottle is inanimate. The house is inanimate. But are the molecules in this inanimate? Maybe not. Are the hadrons inanimate in it? Maybe not. The atoms? Maybe not. What he's missing, and what panpsychism is missing, is a nested periodicity of sentience, which is this in sentient singularity theory, my proposal. And you can't ever know this for sure, because you can't ever know whether or not someone else is sentient. You can only know that you are sentient, and you can't not know that you it's like you can't not know that you are sentient. But I am proposing that these are essentially like the levels of sentience, and that a hadron is an assembly of quarks. These are not sentient. These are like the kind of the fingers of the universe, which is sentient. Its fingers are inside of itself, like manipulating, animating things, like giving the first push. They're points of force. A quark is a point of force. That's really what it is. We call them elementary particles. It's a point of force. And an atom is an assembly of hadrons. A molecule is an assembly of atoms. A cell is an assembly of molecules. An organism is an assembly of cells. A family is an assembly of organisms. A caste is an assembly of families. And a technological singularity is an assembly of castes. And so what is a neuron, though? It's a cell. And so does the water bottle fundamentally exist? No. It's a thing. It's not a being. Does a neuron fundamentally exist? Yeah, it's a someone. It's not just a something. It's also someone. It does fundamentally exist. Just as fundamentally as you do. This is the problem, is that if you don't have this, which goes on to form this, it's consecutive. This one is within this one. It's just an entire verse, basically, a universe. It's like that, almost, kind of. Or you could say the universe is all of these combined, these verses. But chain of verses. That model, we can get into it more deeply another time, but I've also explained it on here. If you go back and watch some of the first videos I put on this channel, I explained how I made it and what it is. That before I even came up with the term sentient singularity theory. And but I show it if you want a full explanation of that beautiful shape. But this singularity assembly structure that allows for completion to exist, like that, you need that. Otherwise, yeah, you have the same problem as panpsychists, where it's like, oh, does the table have a consciousness? But then you take the leg away, now does it have consciousness? Yeah, that's a problem. But if the table is conscious, but it's not, most likely, at least, it doesn't appear to be. But something has to be there. And I'm proposing that it's the molecules, and at least some molecules, and atoms, and hadrons are sentient. And you need that coherence. And it's just missing it in panpsychism. But it's missing it also in Bernardo's work. It's just that panpsychists falsely accuse non-sentient structures like electrons and tables of being sentient. And so it still formulates an incoherent perspective. But Bernardo accuses them of not being sentient, but also of cells of not being sentient, of neurons of not being sentient. And that is just as incoherent. Because there's only that which is coherent and that which is incoherent. There's not more incoherent and less incoherent. I mean, there's definitely more complete and less complete, but there's no more incoherent and less incoherent. More coherent and less coherent. There's just coherent and not coherent. And whilst Bernardo's worldview is certainly more complete than like the materialist anti-theists, self-described atheists, I guess you could say, it's not more coherent because it is ultimately still fundamentally incoherent, which makes it all incoherent. Coherent is a completed circle. Bernardo has a more complete circle, but doesn't complete the circle. But you can't have a more coherent and less coherent circle. You can just have a more complete and less complete circle, kind of. But it's, you get it, hopefully. Hopefully I'm being coherent. The idea of God making choices. Okay. A choice implies possibility, which means a possibility space outside of God, which means a fundamental duality rather than a fundamental singularity of God. No, I'm saying that God's choice, what God chooses, is inevitable. And that at the level of God, it's different. It's just different. God, I think, because the reason for this, and this is like not complicated, but it's tough, is because God, I think, always makes the best choice with the information that he has. And he can make a different choice later. It's not even a different choice. It's a choice, another choice later as he gets more information, but he still would have made the best choice with the information that he had when he made the choice, which means that there's really it's still a choice to do or not. It's when it's God. It's not really, the choice isn't for God. For us, it's like to do this or to do that. And for God, it's like to do or not do. So it changes it a little bit. It's not, there's no possibility space. It's just he can make space or not make space. If that makes sense. It's probably not the best way of explaining it, but I hope it's enough to get you to think about it. I will continue to try and explain that better in the future. If causality is foundational, there is no beginning because every cause must have a prior cause. I never said causality is foundational. I don't know what that would even mean for causality to be foundational. I said someoneness is foundational. Does Alex here in debate with me? No, he's not. Hopefully one day. That would be great. But I'm very small channel, and I don't anticipate him coming on here. But I would love to have him on if he ever was interested. But I'm not even going to ask to go on his show. That's ridiculous. You shouldn't ask to go on anybody's show. You just wait to be invited. You can say to somebody, if you ever want, if you're ever in a conversation with them already, you can be like, hey, if you ever want to have a conversation about this, I'm happy to come on the show. But you should now say, I'd love, can I come on the show? If you're not already in a conversation with somebody, especially, there's a context that's appropriate. I guess I would say. I've never emailed anybody yet and asked to go on that show, and I will not do that. But if I speak, I will say this: if I speak about anybody on here, and I show any clips of anybody on here, and they do want to come on my show, then they can definitely send me a message in any way that they choose to, and I will definitely have them on. If I'm willing to speak about a conversation that you've had on here and give my commentary, I will definitely be willing to speak with you live in front of everybody. So I don't want to ever appear like I'm speaking behind somebody's back. If I speak about you on here, about your conversations on here and give my commentary, I will have you on if you ask. So, okay.
You're I don't know if you can sort of separate out your metaphysics of objects, right? But there's luckily we're in good company.
This is Alex O'Connor really trying to explain this to Bernardo, and he's realizing the issue was with Bernardo's explanations.
A fair few of the people listening will actually know what that means. But is that the kind of view you're getting at? That there's no sort of real distinction between like material objects and we're just kind of organizing stuff and putting like a label on it?
I think there are actual distinctions in the world that have physical correlates, but they are not the boundaries projected by our language. For instance, an example I gave you earlier.
That he's right about.
If I stick a needle in my arm, I feel it. If I stick a needle in the arm of my chair, I don't feel it. That's an ontological boundary right there. There is a differentiation. In one case,
Guys, sentient singularity theory. Feeling is the ontological boundary. He's right. And I've been saying it. He's right. That's exactly what it is. But that when I say family in my like, you know, periodicity of sentience, it's a marriage. That's what I'm talking about. And when I said earlier here, it's like my wife cannot have a good day and I have a bad day. It's impossible. We both have a good day or we both have a bad day. That's it. Because there's an ontological boundary between me and her. But there's an ontological boundary between you and a cell in your body. But there's also a shared space that is not just a space. There's a shared beingness there as well, because there's also a field of feeling that extends beyond you and encompasses that which extends to the being that you're within, or that you are also, which is the being of marriage. And it's the shared feeling between you and your wife is marriage. That's what I mean by family on there. It's a marriage. It's not just, but it's also, your children, when your children have an awful day and they really feel bad, like they're hurt, like they feel hurt, like really, really hurt. Parents who are actually like parents, like good parents who are like present, will have a bad day.
Doing the other one, I don't. So I seem to be a real thing. And I have empirical grounds to say that I am a separate thing. Because the needle...
But you want to go further than that and say not only like is, the arm of the chair not a part of me, but also when I stab the arm of the chair doesn't feel it. Now, commonsensically, of course it doesn't. But on this view, people might be listening and going, well hold on a second. If we're all just sort of excitations of a field, why do I feel the stabbing of the arm, but how do you know the chair doesn't feel the stabbing of its arm?
There is no chair. The chair is an arbitrarily carved out subset of a great image, a great appearance, a great show that we call the inanimate universe. Is there something it is like to be the inanimate universe as a whole? Yes. Does that complex, the inanimate universe as a whole, feel when I stick a needle in the chair? Yes.
No, it doesn't.
Is it pain? No.
No, it doesn't. But it's not an inanimate universe. It's an animate universe. It feels when other beings within it feel to some degree, but it doesn't feel when you stick a needle in a chair. It feels when you stick a needle in you. That's what it feels. That's when it feels. You feel and it feels, but it doesn't feel you sticking a needle in a chair. You're not sticking a needle in a chair. You're sticking a needle between like string.
I would be anthropomorphizing the mind of nature if I did that. Is it significant? No, it's nothing. It's like you registering the flotation of one neurotransmitter cell across one synaptic cleft. I mean, yes, it builds up to an experience that you do register, but that specific little thing is negligible. It's infinitesimally insignificant, right? So yes, the picture is coherent. Any action in nature is felt by something, by some complex, but the boundaries across complexes are not the boundaries between things that we call things because we have distinct words for them.
That's correct. That statement is correct. And I don't want to just rip on him because I think that he is closer than what is the mainstream, for sure. like way closer. But that is correct. Okay. We're gonna try and end this soon. There are things. Okay, let's try this clip, and then there's like 2 more clips, and then we're gonna go.
Share. There's no you. There's no me. There is just the mind and excitations. And
Correct.
so it's a little bit. That's why I'm like, it's a little surprising to hear you say, actually, no, there are these sort of things which seem to sort of fulfill this role of the self. Like there's me and there's the limits of my experience, and you're using words like me and my and I.
Yes.
And I just wondered sort of how those go together.
Well, the personal me, the I, is an illusion, but an illusion is not nothing. An illusion is happening. It could have not happened conceivably. So we have to account for the fact of the illusion. And we account for that through this notion of association and dissociation, how integrated the dynamics of integrated information form complexes and dissolve complexes. This is a crucial point. To say that something is an illusion means only that it's not what it seems to be, or that it doesn't have fundamental existence. But you still have to account for the mechanism of the illusion. Why is this illusion happen? How is it coming about? An illusion is not nothing. It exists as such, as an illusion. It needs to be accounted for.
Again, this is just a linguistic problem. I see what he's trying to say, and I don't think that what he's trying to say is necessarily false. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt there. I might be wrong on that, but someoneness is the foundational nature of existence. And yes, there is single someone at the initial point, and there's single someone that everyone else is within. But the beings that the someones that are within that are being created within that, those partitions of sentience that are you and me, and probably hadrons and dogs and marriages even, they're not illusions. I don't like the term illusion in anything involved in metaphysics. Illusion is a trick. We should have called, magicians, we should have called them illusionists. And we probably did at some point, because I'm pretty sure there's a movie called The Illusionist or something like that. And it's about a magician. And I think. And it's when something appears to be something that it's not. It's not what it appears to be, or when it doesn't fundamentally exist. Like, that's just not. There are beings and things, and perspectives that are not fundamentally existent, which are not, meaning they're not some other someones within God's someoneness, are things. But they like this. The language is, I'm tripping over myself because I'm trying to use this language to describe what I'm trying to say, and you just can't. There are beings and things, that are not beings are not fundamentally existent. If fundamentally existent means anything, then it must also mean that you and me exist. If fundamentally existent means something that would exclude you and me, then it would only include God, and then it would be a redundant term. God is the only being that is eternally existent, which means like having no beginning and no end. We can be infinitely existent, which means like you have a beginning and no end, whereas eternally existent means like no beginning and no end. Infinitely existent means like you if you die and you live on eternally, or not eternally, live on infinitely after that in the afterlife, like then you're infinitely existent, but like you're not eternally existent because you didn't always exist. That appears to be apparent, actually. Otherwise, you would remember like being everything, being God. Like it just doesn't make sense. It would eliminate distinctiveness between beings, and it would eliminate meaning again. So, and we feel meaning. So we need to trust that it exists. So it's just the words that he's using are not good. That is one I just don't like. Words like simulation, illusion, like these terms are helpful to break people out of the materialist mindset, but they are not enough to describe the truth. They're not true enough to describe the truth. And they can't be. Simulation and illusion are intrinsically defined by as things that are not true. You know? So like you can't use them to describe the truth. I don't like the term illusion. I don't really want to keep going about it because I'll just chase my own tail. But again, I used to have this quote on my Twitter, and it said, like, if you chase a headless chicken, then you become a headless chicken. You know, Bernardo, anybody who's using the words like illusion and stuff to describe like fundamental metaphysics, is not, they're still like a chicken with their head cut off to some degree. We shouldn't chase it. Okay. Almost done.
Perhaps to close then, just on that thought, do you find that there is a consistent and like understandable but most common like misunderstanding that people have when they listen to your lectures or read your books that you might want to take an opportunity to clear up that we maybe haven't cleared up already?
To say that everything is mental is not to say that everything is in your mind.
Right.
It doesn't contradict the existence of a world outside our minds. The problem is that the physicalist thinks that anything outside a personal mind must be non-mental. Why? I mean, if you look to the horizon, it's Earth all the way until the horizon. You know there is a world beyond the horizon. Do you think it's something other than Earth or just more Earth? So what I'm saying is that beyond the boundaries of individual dissociated minds, it's just more mind, not your mind, not a mind that follows your wishes and obeys your imagination and your morning affirmations. And no, it's not you, the illusory dissociated you, but it is mental. It has an inner perspective of its own, and it may unfold in a way that is very regular, very predictable, almost mechanical, because it's an instinctive mind, not a mind that evolved over 4 billion years to deliberate and plan so to conquer the world.
I think it's helpful to remember that we are in the universe. We are a part of the universe. And in the way that you want to speak of individuated selves as just like excitations of a great big field, like that might sound a bit weird to a physicalist, but I think the physicalist needs to remember that they think the same thing. They also believe that the universe is just sort of made up of particles, which modern science tells us is just an excitation of quantum field, and that consciousness is just a product of the brain, and that brains are just atoms, which are just excitations of the field, which means that all you are as a conscious agent is an excitation of a great big field. Your view is to say, we know that there's consciousness. We know that there's mentality. We're experiencing it right now. And since the best understanding of what we are is excitations of a great big field, that field is mental. You know, that's just what's going on.
Yeah.
The physicalist kind of goes the other way. They start with the field and say that there's this thing called a field, and somehow consciousness fits into it or comes out of it. But it's actually not that far away. It almost feels like when I speak to someone like you that you're taking assumptions that are already agreed upon by a physicalist and just flipping them on their head. Yes, like mental activity is just the same thing as brain activity. Because brain activity is just what it looks like from the outside. Whereas they go the other way, you know, mental activity comes from the brain. You're like, well, actually just the appearance of the brain comes from the mental stuff. It's almost like the same desire for synthesis and monism, and there's only one stuff that the universe is made out of, but just, you know, looking at it in a mirror. You know what I mean?
Yes, I've thought about what you're saying. There is a commonality.
Good job, Alex. But Bernardo, watch.
I espouse rationalism, determinism, reductionism, and monism. Physicalists, however, tend to think that the only rationalist, reductionist, deterministic, and monistic alternative on the table is physicalism. That is a astounding level of lack of theoretical creativity and philosophical blindness. We do espouse the same values, but I submit to you that the only reason you think what I'm saying is mind-blowing and physicalism is level-headed is cultural indoctrination. Physicalism is the most magical, arbitrary, gratuitous, inflationary, ridiculous metaphysical alternative on the table. That physicalists espouse the same values I espouse, doesn't mean that physicalism is consistent with those values. It is not. If you think it is, it's because you haven't given it more serious thought. You're just
Okay. Well, here's the thing. You need God to be someone. Existence itself, eternal existence, that monistic being that is internal and inevitable and all-encompassing, to be someone in order to have the context to make any of this make sense, including physicalism or idealism. And otherwise, both of them will fall apart. They're both incoherent. The only way to make both of them coherent is to contextualize them within theism. And Alex is right. Bernardo is basically just flipping it. And while flipping it does make it more complete, because you're starting from I am, it doesn't make it complete or coherent or any more coherent just because it's more complete. You still, if you don't complete it, then it's not going to be coherent. It might be more complete, but it's not coherent. And Bernardo didn't realize that at all. When you say monism, I'm a monist. I'm a dualist. I'm a monist. I can't, it's like, stop. There's just theists and anti-theists. Do you believe that existence is fundamentally someone or not? Initially, all-encompass, totally, initially, someone or not. And that's it. And I would say that Bernardo says that it is and it isn't. And that's not, you got to choose one. And physicalists would say it isn't. But it is. And that's the only way to have logical coherence with this. And I think it is my takeaway, and I'm not Alex O'Connor because there's an ontological boundary, but my takeaway is that I'm inferring that Alex is realizing this in this conversation with Bernardo based on the questions that he's asking and the statements that he's making. And my hat's off to him for that. Wise scribes, professors, nor scholars questioning themselves. His consumed knows his commands before the very first step forward before him. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to think about it. Wise scribes, professors, nor scholars questioning themselves. Has consumed, knows his commands before the very first step, before him. Maybe try rewriting it differently in a comment on this video, and I will read it and respond, because I'm going to end the stream now. But what I will say is that if you're going to say there's more mind beyond you, no, you're someone inside someone else. You're a mind within a mind. That's what it means to be someone within someone else. And but that means that you can't be like, well, just because mind is fundamental doesn't mean that there isn't a world beyond you, and that it will obey your commands and stuff. Like, I agree with that, but he's starting to dissolve because he's saying things like, or his statement is starting to like fall apart because he's saying things like there isn't a world beyond you. No, it's a someone beyond you. That's what it is. He's saying there's something beyond you. Yeah. But the thing is that if that isn't someone, then guess what? Then the world will just obey your commands. That's all it will do. But that's not the case, because there's a someone beyond you. And their will be done. So with that, thank you, everyone. Please hit the like button and comment any questions that you didn't get to ask in the comments below, and I will get to them. And I hope this was coherent and complete enough. But again, I really respect Bernardo, and I respect Alex O'Connor quite a bit. And anybody again who I speak about on here, very willing to always engage with actually if they're interested. That said, I do have a Discord. I've not been very active in it lately. That's what happens when you have a toddler for the first time. You're figuring out how to rebalance your life. Starting in the new year, I'm really trying to change that. I'm also trying to, if you want to join, you have to send me a private message on Instagram and I'll send you the link. And I used to do calls on there every week. I haven't in a while, but we're going to start doing them regularly again. I'm not going to say every week, but they will be at a regular schedule again. And I'm still figuring that out. That will start again in the new year. And I'll keep everybody on there posted about that. Also, and that is a great community of people who I miss speaking to. If you're watching this, I miss you. So I will be back. And also, someone told me that my thumbnails look like a high school project. A friend of mine, maybe not wrong. If you do join that community and you have any ideas for thumbnails, for new thumbnail type of structure, any questions on sentient singularity theory, send me a private message on Instagram, and I'd love to hear from you. So with that, thank you, everybody. Please hit the like button, comment anything further down below, and I will speak to you next week. Peace.